Morning, everybody. Namaste. Good to see you. Good to be with all of you. And for those joining on Facebook and YouTube, we welcome you as well into the space. Happy that you can join us. Before we get things started as far as the message goes this morning, I do want to remind you that we have the Raise the Roof Gala coming up on April 29th. That's to give the church a new roof, which is desperately needed. So if you can attend, you'll be able to eat Italian food and dance the night away. So if that's your thing, if it's not your thing, you can still give. So pick up a flyer, and it's on the back table there as you go out. Thank you for your support. So, talking this morning about looking at this journey that we talked about a bit last week, where we are leaving one state of mind and we're entering into a different state of mind. And that has been, explained and written about and discussed in numerous ways. One is dream to awakening. One is from ignorance to knowledge. One is from bondage to salvation. This journey is really something that is, as we looked at last week from the teachings of A Course in Miracles, really a journey within your own consciousness. So it's not a physical journey within space and time. And so one of the major parts of this journey is what we're going to look at today and drill down on to some degree. And as always, and I keep saying this to all of you at the start of the service, I am just offering suggestions. I am giving you ideas to consider, ways of thinking that might be helpful for you that you haven't thought of before. But I am in no way forcing my opinions on anyone. Don't know why I say it, but I do. I just want you to be clear that this is for you to choose and see what works best for you. Right? There's no obligation to toe a line when you come here. So I want you to feel always free within yourself and express that freedom towards the end of our service through Q&A or anything else that you'd like. And as I've said before, if you don't agree with something, I'd love to hear that as well. That often adds great spice to the soup. So keep that in mind as we move along. So what we're going to look at, like I said, is this very important step along this journey without distance, and that is, remember, this journey is to a place that we are not aware of, right? We are ignorant of. And so one of the requirements is we have to let go of our false knowledge, right? We assume we know, sitting here this morning, what everything means. We know who we are, we know kind of what the world is about, we know the people in our life and what they're up to. Like we have all of these opinions and beliefs that seem to be factual. And so this journey from sleep to awakening would immediately raise doubt on these so-called facts. And that can be a bit unsettling at first because what seems to be true and real and solid turns out to be more of a opinion, possibly even a hallucination. And so as we travel on this mystic path, we're going to undergo what many of the mystics have called this way of negation, via negativa. And the way of negation is basically where you begin to doubt, with a healthy skepticism, what you consider right now to be true. In fact, and there was a book by this title, The Three Pillars of Zen. Philip Kapleau was a military man that went to Japan during World War II and studied with some of the great Zen masters there. When he came back, he wrote that classic book, The Three Pillars of Zen. And what the three pillars of Zen are great doubt is the first pillar, great faith is the second pillar, and great perseverance is the third pillar. We're going to more or less look at great doubt today. And that includes, as we move along in this conversation, doubting the doubter. That's a big one. Because oftentimes when we start to go on this path of negation, to a place that we're not really sure of, to really what is called in the Eastern Church, the unknowability of God. Like God can't be known. God can't be thought of. The true essence of God can't be spoken. It's not conceptual. And so in a way, we're like blind people trying to find the way to the door that leads to knowledge. And so this great doubt is going to be a requirement to, first of all, put you in touch with the fact that you really don't know what you think you know. Right? And this is borne out within that classical story that every mystical school seems to co-opt. It's been said to have been a story that the Buddha told. It's been said to have come from the Vedanta. And it's been said also that the Sufis told this story, and I'm sure you know it well. The elephant and the blind men, right? So we have in that story, if you haven't heard it or haven't heard it in a while, an elephant. And at each part of the elephant, there are blind men with their hands on just a portion of the elephant. One's holding the tail, one's holding the ears, one's got his hands on the side body, one's got his hands on the legs, etc. And the king or Raja is sitting there in front of these blind men, and he asks, "What is it before you?" And the blind men begin to speak in turn. "I have a palm leaf. I have a fly whisk. I have a tree trunk. I have a solid wall." And the blind men begin to argue with one another that what they are hearing from the other blind men is completely false because they know what's in front of them. And so as they begin to argue, the king or the Raja laughs. And this is a very deep story hidden within the simple comical symbol of the blind men and the elephant. The Raja is the awakened mind. The 5 blind men are the 5 senses. The elephant is reality. And so what you want to recognize then is we are all positioned within a portion of reality, and from where we are standing and what we are experiencing, we consider it the end-all and be-all, and it's real. And then other people are standing in a different position. And what they're experiencing is very real to them. And so when we can't understand why they say that reality is like this and not the way we see it and know it, then we either consider them crazy or wrong or, just out of touch or whatever way we want to label them. But do we ever step back and think maybe we're all operating on partial knowledge? Maybe all of this is actually more of an uncertainty, and what we are really looking for can't be found through the senses. And that's why the Raja laughs. The Raja laughs because that is a failed experiment. You cannot ascertain reality through your 5 senses. And so the journey back requires you to recognize the senses for what they are. And we're going to look at these very probably unexpected interpretations of what the senses are really about. And I'll let the cat out of the bag first by saying that A Course in Miracles will say to you that you're not actually getting impressions from the external world and then making up your mind about what your senses are delivering to you. In fact, he says in A Course in Miracles that you've already made up your mind. And what you then do is use the senses to cherry pick reality to confirm what you already believe. So the senses are not in any way giving you reality. They're basically confirming the reality that you already think is true. That's why you can't trust the senses, because they are only messengers delivering back to you what you already believe is fact. So in other traditions like the Advaita Vedanta school, they call the senses robbers and murderers, harsh terms. But in this school of the Advaita, this non-dual school in India, the reason why they call the senses robbers and murderers is because they split up and fragment what is intrinsically whole. That what we are really looking at, even though our senses are heavily distorting it, is one ocean of information and being. And because we are, in a way, distorting it through our sense apparatus, we assume that there is space between bodies, and that's not me over there, and this is me in this part of the skin. And so our senses have given us this real distorted view that murders the oneness or unity of reality. So much like the analogy that's used in the ocean and the waves, that what we're really seeing is an oceanic presence with manifestations like waves coming up from this great, vast being. And when we learn this mystic path of negating our ignorance, which we take as knowledge, we begin to clear the mirror of our mind. So our mind is no longer deluded in thinking that the senses are giving us reality. The mind actually goes into a place of going within to discover reality. And it's through the veil of this false ego that we come to the illuminative state of our true soul or self. And once we have that illumined mind, the senses will show us an illuminated world. That's their purpose. They deliver what we intend, what we want. When we want to be illuminated, we must go through the veil of our own ignorance and then come out on the other side illuminated, and then our senses will light up the world. Okay? So we're going to look at this in a bunch of different and hopefully interesting ways so you don't fall asleep or get distracted. And so we're going to start with Hafiz. And, as I had said, we are going through this veil of our ego individuality because it's really the ego self that is the assumption that creates the grand illusion of separation. That you're a self set apart from everything and everyone else, and you're uniquely different. You're not just an ocean. You're not just a wave on the ocean. You are something other. You are something unique. And you're not that wave or that wave. You're this wave. And there ain't no ocean. There's you, and there's everybody else. And so this distortion within your consciousness that you call yourself, that I call myself, is really what's really connected to this undoing of the trust in the senses. Because remember, the senses are only going out to confirm for you that you are the separate self. So the real first step is not to trust the senses and to, as we're going to see in a moment through Hafiz's poetry, learn how to efface the false self, right? Undo it. So this is a poem entitled Effacement. Now listen to this. Effacement is a golden gun. It was not easy to hold it against my head and fire. I needed great faith in my master to suffocate myself with his holy bag full of truth. I needed great courage to go out into the dark, tracking God into the unknown. And not panic or get lost in all the startling new scents, sounds, and sights. Or lose my temper, tripping on those scheming night and day around me. Hafiz, effacement is the emerald dagger you need to plunge deep into yourself upon this path to divine recovery upon this path to God. Right? So a few things are borne out here, and you can hear through the poem that Hafiz is touching on those other two pillars of Zen. Right? He talks about how he needed great faith in order to pull that trigger. And he needed great courage or great perseverance to stay the course in this journey of self-effacement. Because one of the things that we know, if we've set out on this path for any length of time, is that the ego doesn't go quietly into the night. The ego is a crafty character. And remember, the ego poses as you in your own head. The ego is your conditioning. The ego is your story. The ego is your point of view as the separate self. You've never not known yourself in this life as other than the ego. So to set out on this path to the unknown and to be willing to efface who you think you are for something that you're not really aware of just yet takes great courage, great faith, and great doubt. And Hafiz also says that he did not panic or get lost in all the startling new sense, sounds, and sights. Now, we talked about this last week when we looked at that Gnostic teaching called the exegesis of the soul, or the interpretation of the soul, which was this journey of the feminine divine soul into the material energy, getting lost, right? Now, if you recall in that story, as she began her path back to God, her outward-going senses underwent a transformation. They turned in and began to light up inner space. So as you begin this journey, you're going to undergo like that flip that happens in Mach, where you are going in one way, and now you're going to flip the instrumentation, and you're going another way. And your inner sensorium begins to light up an inner universe that's just as vast as the outer universe. So Hafiz is saying in that process, don't become nervous or discouraged or panic and get lost, okay? Because these new scents and sounds and sights will reveal to you parts of yourself that were heretofore unknown. You're going to expand who you think you are. You're going to eventually come to the point where you and God kiss, right? This beatific vision. But the way that this will play out in your experience, so we're told, is that, as it says within many of these mystic teachings, that when you discover who you really are, you discover God. That the light of God is you. And so you must begin to open up your belief system to allow such a glorious you, which means as you go along this path, your limiting beliefs are going to dissolve. So when that's starting to happen, don't get panicky and don't think that you're going to get lost. That's why in these teachings, oftentimes you'll see this in Catholic mysticism, in Kabir's mysticism, etc., that you cling to the name of God. You see it in Krishna consciousness. You cling to the name of God, or whatever way or symbol inspires you, because as your moorings are released and your ground of reality dissolves, you have to cling to something real. And God always extends a ray of grace during the dark night of the soul. Remember, St. John of the Cross says the dark night of the soul is when you don't trust your senses anymore. You're literally out of the world of the known, and you're into the world of the unknown, the suprasensory. beyond the senses. You know, did anyone here see The Chosen, that mini-series of the life of Jesus? You got to watch it. It's phenomenal. It's done with such subtlety and awareness that I highly recommend you watch it. It's on angelstudios.com. You could watch all 3 seasons for free. And they're basically giving you the life of Jesus, but with wonderful realism and humanness. Not just, the flowing robes and the 1950s, symphony music playing in the background. This is really good stuff. And one of the scenes is taken from the gospel where St. Peter is in the boat with his other disciples, with his other friends, and Jesus is walking on the water towards the boat at night, and they're in a storm. And I think most of us know this story. And Peter says to Jesus, if it's you, tell me that I can come out and join you. And so Jesus says, come. And Peter steps out, and everybody knows this story, right? He steps out onto the waves, and he's actually walking on the water. And he's got his eyes on Jesus. And then as soon as he starts to look down at where he is and what's going on with the storms brewing all around him, he starts to lose his faith, and he begins to sink. And he goes under. And the movie, the TV show does a wonderful job of portraying this. And Jesus, standing on the water, reaches in, grabs Peter, who's now drowning, and pulls him up. And, just as an aside, this image of above reaching down below and pulling us up, that's what literally is given in that Hebrew word Hanan. That's where I get my name. I'm Yohanan in Hebrew. He is graceful. He is full of grace. And grace is literally that arm that can pull you up into reality. And when Peter gets pulled up, he literally clings to Jesus, and you can't help but cry when you see this. He clings to him and he goes, don't let me go. Don't let me go. And that's where you have to get to. That's where you have to see life from. That there's no other hope except the real, the true, the beautiful. And you have to cling to it. And so this idea then is when, as Hafiz is saying, you're effacing your false self. You're going to feel at times like you're drowning, like you can't do it. Like, what the hell? I thought this was the path that led to joy. Why is everything breaking down around me? Why are the people that I love leaving? Why are the people that I thought loved me showing up as takers or users? Why do I feel so alone? And it's to get you completely off of your own self-dependency, to break you. And until you're broken, because, Peter's that symbol of the I can do it, I got this kind of mentality. That's what shows up when you really do step out in faith and begin to see life the way it really is, not the way you think it is. Another one by Hafiz. This one's called Dividing God. The moon starts singing when everyone is asleep, and the planets throw a bright robe around their shoulders and whirl up close to her side. Once I asked the moon, why do you and your sweet friends not perform so romantically like that to a larger crowd? And the whole sky chorus resounded. The admission price to hear the lofty minstrels speak of love is affordable only to those who have not exhausted themselves dividing God all day and thus need rest. The thrilled tavern fiddlers who are perched on the roof do not want their notes to intrude upon the ears where an accountant lives with a sharp pencil, keeping score of words another in their great sorrow or anger may have once said to you. Hafiz knows the sun will stand as your best man and whistle when you have found the courage to marry forgiveness, when you have found the courage to marry love. So in other words, when you are illuminated, you see God in all things. The moon will sing, the planets will dance. There is a divinity that is permeating, that is immanent in creation. Right? So we've talked already about this way of negation, right? The via negativa. In Greek, it's called apophatic. The apophatic way is to deny everything is real and seek only the unknown God by doubting your thoughts, doubting your belief system, doubting your story, doubting what your senses say. A big no to everything. Right? That's the way of negation, apophatic. Another way into the mystical dimension is the cataphatic, which is you begin to see divinity in the sunset, in the moon, in the ocean, in the flowers, in the hum of the bees. In other words, nature begins to show you itself as a gateway into Zen, a gateway into divinity. And the reason why we don't see it, according to Hafiz, is we're too busy dividing God all day, and therefore we need rest. It's exhausting to judge everything all day. That's what we do. When he says that we divide God all day, I'm not seeing Hank as the wave of the infinite ocean, which is one with the infinite ocean. There's no separation between the ocean and the wave, but in my judgment there is. Hank's not in the ocean. Hank's not in God, in my opinion, in my belief system. Hank's just another guy that I know, happen to like. He's a good guy. He's not a bad guy. There's a bad guy. So I have all of these judgments. Everybody looks. I have all of these judgments that are dividing God in my mind, and that is exhausting. And these judgments are what my senses report back to me. Yes, he is a bad guy. Yes, he is a good guy. Yes, it's a good day. Yes, it's a bad day. And so this is exhausting, and it not only exhausts me physically and energetically, but it also blocks my awareness from seeing divinity in all things. So Hafiz is saying that not only do we not experience this beauty of creation because of our judgments, but he says that when we're ready to experience it, we must go on the roof, right? He says that. In other words, we have to get beyond the rational sensory experience of ourselves and really open up to the highest that we can for ourselves. Go on the roof and open up to the mystery. And he says, those are the tavern fiddlers. And in Sufism, the tavern is where you meet God, right? It's like the sacred circle. And these people who want to meet God, he says, do not want their notes to intrude upon the ears. So they go silent. So no judging and no internal chatter. Total stillness and receptivity. And then he gives this, yeah, it's really hot in here. Bill, would you mind dropping the thermostats? Thank you. So really great image here. He says these true seekers don't want their notes or their voices or their opinions or their belief system to intrude upon their listening for the real truth. And their thoughts, their beliefs, and their opinions is where the accountant lives. And the accountant has a sharp pencil and is keeping score of words that everybody else said to us that we didn't like, that we're still holding grievances for, that we're saddened about, that we're angry over. And so this mind of the accountant is really picayune and is writing down everything that's wrong with everybody else. Don't listen to that voice, or you'll miss the party. You'll miss the beauty that is right here. That's what Hafiz is saying. And then last one. Tired of speaking sweetly. This is my favorite of the bunch this morning. Love wants to reach out and manhandle us, break all our teacup talk of God. Right? Teacup talk is we're all proper. Right? If you had the courage and could give the beloved his choice, some nights he would just drag you around the room by your hair, ripping from your grip all those toys in the world that bring you no joy. Love sometimes gets tired of speaking sweetly and wants to rip to shreds all your erroneous notions of truth that make you fight within yourself, dear one, and with others, causing the world to weep on too many fine days. Right? Just like the elephant and the blind men were fighting other blind people. God wants to manhandle us, lock us inside of a tiny room with himself and practice his drop kick. The beloved sometimes wants to do us a great favor, hold us upside down and shake all the nonsense out. But when we hear he is in such a playful, drunken mood, most everyone I know quickly packs their bags and hightails it out of town. Short-term memory here. Dividing God. Oh, sorry, no, that wasn't it. It's tired of speaking sweetly. So as we're sitting here, have you started going through that process of at least being able to question or doubt what your senses are giving you right now as what is really here? Just take a moment, because oftentimes we're just on to the next thought and we're still that same ego identity that's staying under the radar of our own inquiry or insight, and we just keep perpetuating this version of ourselves, which is making us not see the joy that we have within our own being. And I invite you to continue this process of inquiring into the believability of what your senses are showing you. And this is going to help in that process. It's lesson 151 in A Course in Miracles. And remember that story of the elephant and the blind man when Jesus opens with this. No one can judge on partial evidence. That is not judgment. It is merely an opinion based on ignorance and doubt. its seeming certainty is but a cloak for uncertainty it would conceal. It needs irrational defense because it is irrational. In other words, try questioning your belief system and watch what happens. You'll probably get triggered, but definitely if you question somebody else's belief system, you'll certainly see the trigger, right? People shut down. They run away. They get out of town. They distract. But one of the things that we're going to see as we journey into the real from the unreal is there's no real in between. You're either awake or asleep. You're either in ignorance or knowledge. You're in darkness or light. You're in bondage or freedom. When you've made the choice to leave the darkness, you will gain the light degree by degree. It will be a transition and a bridging experience, but your chosen direction, your end has been intended. Now the means will be provided. See, you're always getting your ultimate concern. So in other words, if you've chosen the ego in this moment, you will only see the means to corroborate ego evidence. This moment will serve what you've already intended to make real. And there's nothing no one, including God, could do to alter that course for you. That's what you want. You want to confirm you're a separate self. And this world will accord with that aim. It will give you the means, the evidence, to affirm for you that you're separate. But as soon as you begin to question, first of all, is this the choice that I really want? Is this really giving me what I want? When you start to ask that, you enter into that great doubt phase. And as you begin to doubt what you think you are and what it's offering you, you begin to open up to a different version of yourself. And then the moment will begin to offer you other means to confirm your choice. You want to wake up. Now you'll see everything in your world conspiring to help you wake up. You'll always know your choice by what you're seeing in the world. Right? That's why he says in paragraph 2 here, you do not seem to doubt the world you see. You do not really question what is shown you through the body's eyes. Nor do you ask why you believe it, even though you learned a long while since your senses do deceive. That you believe them to the last detail which they report is even stranger when you pause to recollect how frequently they have been faulty witnesses indeed. Why would you trust them so implicitly? Why but because of underlying doubt which you would hide with a show of certainty. So, how this reminds me of a situation that I've had with Lisa driving. We're at a red light. I'm looking across the street, and I think I see a guy with a manila envelope in his hand trying to cross the street. And I told Lisa, for whatever reason, that was a guy with a manila envelope. And she goes, "Are you kidding me?" She goes, "That's a power box next to a light pole." So I was certain I saw a guy standing waiting to cross the street with a manila envelope. So needless to say, Lisa says, you have to get your eyes fixed before I feel safe driving with you again. But the fact of the matter is, we just think we see what we see. And it's not really always the case. That's why he says, how can you judge? Your judgment rests upon the witness that your senses offer you. Yet witness never falser was than this. But how else do you judge the world you see? You place pathetic faith in what your eyes and ears report. You think your fingers touch reality and close upon the truth. This is awareness which you understand and think more real than what is witnessed to by the eternal voice of truth itself. So we know this through the hard sciences of physics and quantum physics, that everything here is really a cloud of electrons and protons and quarks, subatomic particles that are whirling. And our senses tell us it's a solid chair, but it's a cloud. It's not even physical. As they've drilled down to those electrons in your chair, those electrons can't be located as solid physical particles. They're not physical. That's why he says in A Course in Miracles, would you be able to accept the fact that the world you see is actually a hallucination? That it's not the way we think it is. Right? So, great doubt, great faith, great courage. And few choose to go in this direction. Many go in the way of getting out of town. But few choose to go in the direction that leads to true and lasting joy. And here's the real kicker. What would make us want to get out of town and avoid looking at reality on reality's terms is that we think we're protecting ourselves. We don't like what we feel. We don't like what we hear. It begins to actually feel threatening to our safety, our security, our belief system. But listen to what he says within this same lesson. He says, this thing it speaks of and would yet defend, it tells you, is yourself. He says, you merely can believe the ego's judgments, all of which are false. It guides your senses carefully to prove how weak you are, what you believe is true. He says, this thing it speaks of and would yet defend, it tells you is yourself, and you believe that this is so with stubborn certainty. Yet underneath remains the hidden doubt that what it shows you as reality with such conviction, it does not believe. This ego idea, right, this separate belief that you are alone as this body, it says it is itself that it condemns. It is within itself it sees the guilt. It is its own despair it sees in you. Can you get that? So, I don't know if I'm just speaking to, I guess I am just speaking to myself, so I'll go with that. There's a part of the mind that is so bent on resisting truth, and it's made itself another image for its identity, right? This image is what we all came in here as. We all sat down as this image, and most of us are still listening from this image. We believe that this image is us. We believe its story. And when this image is upset, when this image is fearful, when this image is troubled, we think it's us. And what this journey is going to show you is that this image could never be you. Because when you know yourself, you'll know God. This is a counterfeit image, to be doubted, not to invest it with faith. You get strong medicine here on a Sunday morning. And if it pisses you off, great. Right? The truth will set you free right after it pisses you off. Just a little bit more here. So it says, hear not that voice of the little self. The witnesses it sends to prove to you its evil is your own are false, and speak with certainty of what they do not know. Your faith in them is blind because you would not share the doubts that the ego cannot completely vanquish. Right? In other words, you don't feel at home here. And something in your mind knows that this is true. So feed that doubt. Don't doubt the message. Doubt the doubter. And you'll know, again, if you're here and getting high-test teaching, it's definitely going to bring stuff up. It has to. It must show you the counterfeit for what it is. Then you have a choice, and you get to watch your character. Do you protect the counterfeit? Do you double down? Do you reinvest in the ignorant? Does truth piss you off to where you run away from it and avoid it? Or do you accept the fact that you've been wrong? Most of us are really hell-bent on being right. We need to be right. Because if we're not right, we have to face the uncertainty that we know is underneath our false certainty. Do you think I enjoy giving this message? It's done for love. It's done so that we can all let go of this mind disease of not knowing our unity and our love with one another. Right? So we'll leave it there. Blue Bag's going to go around, and I'd love to hear you guys and what you think. Now, we don't have a microphone, so you're going to hear me repeat what you say.
John,
Dave.
I'm used to this when at places I've been, you stand up to talk to people so they can hear.
Thank you. Great.
I just want to validate what you're saying about being influenced, and especially about the part with Peter, that clinging. I remember the first time I stepped inside a helicopter, part of the training, and that thing started to lift off, and my stomach just grabbed, and I grabbed for the crew chief, and he's just relax, it'll be all right. But what I found, and I've done it negatively myself, is that your words, the words you speak, the words you tell yourself, absolutely change everything. You could tell, all I would have to say is something really insane, like, Lorraine, you don't look quite as nice this morning. That would ruin our day entirely. And I think that's one of the things that we have to recognize, because that's all sensory.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely sensory, and I'm always amazed at how much damage that it can do, because I've had that personal experience, when we think that way.
Yeah.
So I'm here, I hope we're here to change our speech.
Yeah.
We're here to change our thinking.
And like you said, Dave, it's a great illustration when you're undergoing that training in the helicopter for your military training, and you got afraid and you went to cling on to your commanding officer, and then you actually had to rewire your thinking so that you actually can override what your senses are giving you or what your feelings are telling you by changing your attitude, changing your intention, changing what meaning you're giving. So it's like you literally override the body, its senses, and what the world seems to be showing you. You could actually flip it. Instead of scary, it can actually be exhilarating and fun. So this is what we're saying here, that nothing is really being given to us. We are already having our assumptions confirmed for us, right? And then, if you have ill will towards somebody, like you said, and you speak from that place of ill will, you hurt them and you must suffer the blowback, because those thoughts of attack in whatever form have to return to the mind that thought them. Yeah, great. Well, bless the offering. Nice colors. We bless this offering with the intention that it be used to bring light and love into the world in whatever form that may be required, and so it is. Amen. Who else?
I like the line of tracking God into the unknown. You know, as we have new adventures or we're going into directions that feel a little bit scary, or is this
Yeah.
going to be forever? Or, rather than stay in the moment, but to tracking God, you said it at your beginning, into the unknown. And that is, and knowing that He's with you. And
Yeah.
knowing that you'll find it because that's what you're looking
Yeah.
for. You're not looking for the fear. You're looking for the good. I can say as I was raised a Catholic, and everybody goes, I'm a recovering Catholic. I know, I bless that path, because what that path
Yeah.
taught me was to look for the good in people. It really did, right? The God in people. That was my that's what I took away from it, right? That experience, like the guy that's either standing there with a manila envelope or the light bulb, who knows? But that's what I took away from it. And sometimes I forget that I have to I'm creating ahead of me, but really, I'm tracking God into the unknown, because God is always there. God is in here, and it will show up as I look. So I like that line today.
Yeah, well, and to really get our orientation on tracking God into the unknown, it's really when we stop trying to speak over the voice of God, when we stop trying to think apart from the thoughts of God. That means this path of negation, or this path of tracking God into the unknown, is where we have to no longer trust in ourselves and put all of our trust in Him. We must learn how to doubt that we know who we are and go to Him to hear who we are, receive who we are in certainty, because we're not certain of who we are. And the reason why I think these messages are coming through more and more on a Sunday is because, as a society, as a global culture, we're entering into very precarious times. If we don't have our head in the sand, and you're really keeping your finger on the pulse of world news, real news, not entertainment news, real news, then you're seeing things unraveling on many fronts. And so if creature comforts, if situations that we have trusted in for decades begin to fall apart, crumble, get taken away, or diminish in some way that is shocking, who are you then? Where is your safety? Where do you put your faith? What do you trust in? What kind of character do you have? So these teachings, although maybe abrasive or difficult to hear, are necessary to be mature spiritual seekers, people who are ready to actually experience this teaching in the reality that it can bring. Because oftentimes it does take a crisis for us to seek that other way. Because as soon as God wants to turn us upside down and shake, we're looking for the exit. And just in case, this has been prophesied from so many different cultures that, we're entering into this tribulation period of sorts. If that's real, if that's true, and it seems to be showing up, then the shaking is happening. That's what tribulation actually means. It means shaking. And so, your certainty cannot be in this world. Your trust can't be in this world or in you as the body if you want true safety, true peace. And that's going to require something of you at first. Right? Am I the nun up here with the ruler? Anybody else? Yes.
So this is something I would like everyone to help me with. So I was reading the Thich Nhat Hanh poem this week, Please Call Me By My True Names. And there's a stanza within it that I can't understand.
Okay.
And it says, it's talking about, call me by my true name. I am the frog happily swimming in the clear pond. I'm also the grass snake silently feeds itself on the frog. It goes through like that. Then it says, I'm a 12-year-old girl, a refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing beloved. So it's holding the two on equal standings and having compassion for both of them. And that I can't understand. I can't understand to have compassion for both those who the crime is committed against and those who commit the crime. And so I ran into this stanza, and you were talking about anchoring yourself in God's true name. And if God's true name is both the criminal and the victim, then how do you anchor yourself?
Well, it's a very good question. So just for the folks at home, you read a Thich Nhat Hanh poem, and it basically is giving this full view of who Thich Nhat Hanh is and his enlightened vision, and he's both the victim and the victimizer. And you're asking, how can you have compassion for the victimizer, number one, and number two, how can the victim and the victimizer be equal and loved the same? And there's an important detail in that poem that maybe you're not thinking of when you're asking this question, and that is the victimizer hasn't opened his heart and therefore is acting in such a way that is emblematic of the pain that he actually feels within himself for being shut down and closed off. He's going to hurt others because he's hurting himself, right? Can only give what you got. And the victim, in this fuller view of the teaching, especially from Thich Nhat Hanh's Buddhist perspective, isn't a victim. So one of the things that we are oftentimes unaware of because we're only seeing through the pigeonhole of our senses is that there is a vast being that comes in to learn and experience things in the body. And that victim is experiencing something that was generated from within her as that 12-year-old girl. It seems completely preposterous from the ego's perspective. But when you realize that, remember we just read this in A Course in Miracles, the ego's not you. Its despair is its own, right? So in other words, you're projecting a world. As everyone else is projecting a world, that 12-year-old is projecting her world. And that victim experience, it could be the deciding factor that breaks her from thinking she's a victim. She was projecting, I'm a victim. As a result of that, she must enroll. Remember, your senses are going to bring to you the confirmation of what you believe about yourself. This is what we're all doing. That's why there's no real victim being violated by another against their will, as difficult as that might appear at first. Because the deeper you has a belief system that is going out into the world and giving people the role to play to confirm your belief system. And so from Thich Nhat Hanh's view, it's like kind of like the Raja watching the blind people, that these are all points of view, and they're partial and blind. And the only recourse that a victim or a victimizer has, really, is to open up to the healing. And the one that is awake, the only recourse they have, like Thich Nhat Hanh said, is to offer the healing. You can only give what you got. You can only be who you are. You must be healing to the lovable and the unlovable, the worthy and the unworthy, the good and the evil. Whether they receive it or not is up to them. Hope that brings more light.
No, I appreciate it, because when I read it, it hit me and I couldn't move forward. And it just tied into what you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not certainly comfortable with it, but it's giving me another dynamic to look at it.
Yeah, it's a very intense scene, which gets back to my point. If you trust in your senses and you trust that this world is showing you facts, what a madhouse. How can you ever feel safe here if that goes on anywhere? You might have your own little enclave where that doesn't happen and you're comfortable, but you're living in a world where that is going on. Are you okay with that? Right? That's staying asleep. It's putting your head in the sand. The whole point of the talk, so thank you. Final minute or so? Anybody? Yeah, how do you follow that? All right, let's seal the deal. Resting within the quiet of the heart, we know that this path requires us to stop and be quiet and open to receive. And so we just ask for the descent of grace to lift us out of this experience of drowning in the dark waters of ignorance and blindness and false thinking. We ask for this intervention of our higher self to bring the light that we are thirsting for. And in this light, we will come to know that the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, like the wave in the ocean. Amen. Have a great day, everybody. Course in Miracles.